Episode 6 of Department Q starts with Merritt speaking to Sam Hague about her concerns in our past timeline. She believes someone inside the Crown offices told Finch about the witness and almost had Kirsty killed. This has obviously ruffled some feathers, and Sam warns her that she could be watched right now. It's here she admits indirectly to receiving threatening emails and texts. He cuts their chat short and encourages her to pick a better spot than a cemetery she frequents next time they meet up again. The place Merritt picks is the hotel room under her pseudonym. The pair speak about Stephen Burns and his potential impact here, but only temporarily. Alone, Merritt flirts with him a little and wants to trust him. This comes from stripping right down to make sure neither is wearing a wire, but with them both naked, they naturally end up having sex. Merritt has fond memories of this incident, and, well, she isn't exactly subtle about it in her hyperbaric chamber when we cut back to the present. Elsewhere, Carl attempts to talk to Jasper, ringing and suggesting they meet and talk. After, he and Akram show at the church and talk to Fergus again, who's there drinking. He actually gave up for a while, but after the beatdown he received a day prior, he's back on the hard liquor again. Carl is clearly flying too close to the sun, and poor Icarus here has the bruises to prove it. Fergus has been warned off from pursuing this further and talking to Carl, but in a nice little twist, we learn he beat the 3 guys that surrounded him down in the parking lot after the initial sucker punch he received. Fergus being taken off the case, it seems, was more his call to protect him from being beaten down further, rather than to stifle the investigation. Akram has also done his homework here, and is convinced that Fergus would have solved this had he been left to continue. It's a far cry from what we initially thought regarding his ineptitude, and a nice way of subverting expectations. Along with the shooter for the Leith Park murders apparently being caught, Carl shows up at the apartment to try and jog his own memories of the incident, which brings back painful flashes. Remember the press conference from episode 2? Well, it would appear that there's definite weight to the fact this victim found inside the apartment, Archie Allen, was a police informant. However, PC Anderson never said the victim's name. All he said was that he was there for a routine wellness check. Archie may have been bait for a bigger fish, and while Hardy and Carl were not the intended targets, the journalist could be onto something here. Anderson may have been using the bumbling officer persona to play up his own ineptitude to avoid scrutiny. In fact, they're not even sure if Archie Allen, the deceased, had a daughter. While they get on this to investigate further, we circle back to the Merritt case. Rose leads a questioning with Liam again, bringing him back in and asking specifically about his ties to Merritt and how that could pertain to Kirsty. They know that Merritt visited her during week 1 of the trial, but also that Liam's pride was hurt after the affair ended. Liam admits that he was angry and frustrated, but then he woke up and wound up embarrassed about the whole ordeal. The reason the guys are going down this route though is to try and understand if Liam swayed Merritt's opinion into not using Kirsty as a witness given her background. The one above Liam is Stephen Burns, so they seem to nail the fact that Burns was responsible for the hit against Kirsty, but we don't know why he did this just yet, if he even is involved, that is. Meanwhile, Jasper is visited by a nasty man who threatens to ruin him. He wants Jasper to pass on these threats to Carl, but when he shows at the diner, he follows the man out and immediately beats the guy to a pulp. He almost slams his head into the pavement after having blood spat at him, but Jasper stops his dad before everything gets out of control. Rose shows up to see Hardy and brings up someone called Ned Finkel. He was released from hospital 2 weeks after being run over by Julia Montgomery. He lost both his legs as a result, but according to Julia's statement, she was run off the road by another vehicle that came up alongside her. Seeing how she smacked him from behind and there's no witnesses, it's her word against his. Now, this might sound like a pointless tangent and a story that doesn't have any bearing to the show, but it's important. Why? Well, Julia's maiden name was Burns. Julia Burns is a daughter of Stephen Burns, so it seems like someone may have orchestrated this to send a message. That person could be Graham Finch, which in turn would have worked to make Stephen do his bidding. Carl shows back up at therapy, but he's taken aback when Dr. Sonnenberg is back and Rachel is nowhere to be found. He's not happy at the perceived feel of being given the runaround, and he eventually decides to leave. Akram and Rose track down Edmund here, the guy responsible for setting up Carl in the middle of the street with that charade involving Jasper. Carl isn't here, of course, given he's being chewed out by Moira back at the station, while all the other officers stand outside, hilariously listening in. Moira rips into Carl for the very public display and how he now looks like a lunatic, given this is twice in a week that he's done this. The first was with the journalist Dennis at the Scottish Telegraph, but given how scummy this journalist is, he had it coming, right? Moira refuses to fire Carl though, and just as Akram and Rose show up, Moira chews them out too, just for being in the line of fire. She calls them Team Doolally and finds out that a man who initially threatened Jasper and Carl was employed as a chauffeur for Ballantine Transfer and Security, which in itself is owned by Finch Overseas Shipping, that company's owner, Graham Finch. The gang bring up all the connections they've uncovered between Stephen Burns and Graham Finch, but right now it's not the main concern, as Carl was called in to try and point out the killer from a lineup at the Leith Park shooting. However, it doesn't look like any of the men are the ones who actually shot Carl. As the episode closes out though, we cut back to Merritt one more time where trouble is brewing. The airlock appears to be broken because moving a can of drink into a hyperbaric container causes the whole thing to explode, which is a pretty gnarly bit of foreshadowing for what could happen to Merritt. Time is of the essence, it seems. Episode 7 of Department Q starts with Akram and Carl showing up to see Stephen Burns. They bring the connections to Kirsty, Merritt and Liam Taylor to his desk, and while Carl prods him over Kirsty's attack and Finch's potential influences with those inside the prison and outside, Akram wanders about listening intently. The mysterious deaths that occurred just after Kirsty's confession don't help Stephen's case here, and of course there's a small matter of Julia's car accident too. Akram catches Stephen out with his statements about Kirsty's addiction, given Carl never brought it up, and he cracks, at least a little anyway. The only person who can corroborate all of this is Merritt, but only if she's still alive. For the time being, Merritt is alive, but inside her hyperbaric chamber, time is very much of the essence. She scrubbed off the writing from the walls, and through flashbacks, we see that Harry Jennings and Merritt were close as kids. In fact, they used to smoke together and were in a relationship. According to Merritt, they were very much in love. Jamie is not happy with these ties, but there's not much he can do given Merritt is a wild child and doesn't really listen to anybody. Back in the present, Carl shows up to see Graham Finch next and brings up the botched hit on Kirsty. Ed Solomon, the guy they squeezed for info last episode, has quite the treasure trove of evidence on his phone, including messages directly linked to getting those inside the prison to take out Kirsty. Carl is smart and susses that the same men who visited Jasper also went after Fergus too. Now, interestingly, it was Sam Hague who told Robert, Graham Finch's lawyer, about Kirsty a day at trial. He just offered up the information willingly with nothing in return. Why? For now they don't have all the pieces, but it does appear that Finch is involved in some way. Back in the car, there's an amusing bit of dialogue between Carl and Akram as the former tries to figure out the mysterious past regarding his assistant. Akram doesn't offer anything concrete up though, as they get an unlikely call come through. It's Dennis Piper, the slimy journalist from before. Apparently he's got information to help them out and pings over a video of Sam Hague from the past. We know Sam Hague is secretive, but now we understand exactly why. He wouldn't talk to anybody at the office, when he bothered to show up to work that is, and that's because he was actually an ex-convict. Dennis hacked Hague's computer to get hold of the video, something that he himself received after being blackmailed by someone at Godhaven, the prison he was in. Sam was doing his own story and apparently covering someone who could be linked to all of this. The journo, Dennis, encourages Carl to investigate, and specifically through talking to Terry Dundee, the officer over at Godhaven, for the full story. Before Carl continues though, he speaks to Jasper about the drama and decides to finally open up and properly talk about their concerns that night. It's a really nice moment, especially as you can tell Jasper does look up to his stepdad and needs his influence, but isn't quite sure how to express it. Rose meanwhile looks into the mystery surrounding Sam Hague's death. The police initially chalked this up to a traumatic fall pretty quickly, and the timeline certainly matches, but the climbing instructor, Paul Evans, may be lying. Paul sent various messages to Sam telling him he needs to stop keeping secrets and tell the truth. It seems Paul knew about Sam's illicit affairs with Merritt, given the language in these messages. Hardy encourages Rose to go and speak to Paul again when she brings these concerns to him. Rose does just that, and Paul eventually opens up to her, admitting that he and Sam were close and they likened their climbs to therapy sessions where they'd open up and talk together. Apparently Sam never mentioned Merritt though, and the hotel he was frequenting is a completely different venue, called the Spivvy Inn. He wasn't there with Merritt though, it was Chloe. This is how Chloe is involved because, as they'd all been drinking that night, she wound up sleeping with him. Carl shows up to see Rachel at her place, but she's mystified over why she's shown up. Carl admits he's not sure either, as he came for therapy, but it seems like there may actually be feelings growing, but he's not sure how to express it. Eventually, he decides to leave and it's all very awkward. While this is happening, Merritt has an infected tooth, and after getting some pliers to cut it out, she uses those same pliers to mess up the air pressure inside the chamber, smacking the pipes and eventually eventually blasting the wheelchair-bound lady on the other side straight over, knocking her out. Despite making it out of her prison, Merritt manages to call 999, but just as the call connects, a second assailant stomps on her forearm and proceeds to kick her in the head, which is where episode 7 of Department Q comes to an end. So we're getting closer to cracking this case, and it seems like Sam Hague could be the key to all of this, but it's still not clear how he's connected to Merritt and why she's been taken by these assailants. The entire case is starting to unravel now though, but we still don't know the full parts of this, or how it's potentially tied to her father and a situation involving Jennings. The moments involving Rose and Paul are a nice touch though, and the ongoing mystery surrounding Akram adds a surprisingly intriguing element to this drama, as we're not quite sure what this man is capable of or what he did in Syria, which just adds to his allure. Meanwhile, we have more of Rachel here, and it would appear she's not part of this situation involving Merritt, and her ties with her could be completely coincidental. With only 2 episodes left though, I'm sure we'll get some answers soon, and although the pacing has slowed a bit, there's still enough endearing drama to keep things very watchable. Roll on the next chapter. Thanks for watching, and do let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Smash a like or subscribe to the channel, your support is very much appreciated. I'm Greg Wheeler, and from all of us over here at The Review Geek, we'll see you on the next video.